The rules were simple. Don't get involved. Don't let anyone find you. Don't trust anyone ever again. Elena had followed those rules for 3 years, staying alive by staying invisible. Then a helicopter crashed 2 meters from her hiding spot, and she broke every single rule to save a stranger. Some mistakes you make with your eyes wide open. Welcome back to Proudly Black Stories, my beautiful, amazing Pride family. You all have been so supportive, and I promise to always try my best to give you the best stories as I learn and improve every day. If this is your first time coming across my video, do comment below where you're watching from and hit subscribe to officially join the Pride family. Now, let's get into today's story. The city of Miami glittered below like scattered diamonds on black velvet. Each light a testament to power, money, and the kind of success that most people only dreamed about. Julian Blackwood stood in his mansion, hands in his pockets, watching the midnight traffic crawl along. The view cost him 8 figures, but tonight it looked empty, cold. At 35 years old, he owned half the pharmaceutical research facilities on the eastern seaboard, employed over 10,000 people, and commanded boardrooms with a single glance. Yet standing here alone in 12,000 square ft of imported marble and custom Italian furniture, he felt nothing. Behind him, the sound of whiskey hitting crystal broke the silence. Marcus Sterling, his best friend since their Harvard days and current COO of Blackwood Industries, moved across the open living space with the easy confidence of someone who belonged. They had built this empire together. 2 ambitious kids who turned a modest inheritance into a billion-dollar pharmaceutical powerhouse. Marcus knew him better than anyone, which lately had started to feel less like comfort and more like exposure. "You look like you're contemplating jumping," Marcus said, handing him a glass. "Bad for business if the CEO goes splat on Ocean Drive." Julian took the whiskey but didn't drink, still staring at his reflection in the glass. "I found something today." Marcus settled onto the white leather sofa, his expression neutral. "Found what?" "Irregularities in the research division. Someone's been moving money. Small amounts at first, then larger. Offshore accounts, shell companies, the works." Julian turned to face his friend, watching for a reaction. "We're talking about millions, Marcus. Maybe more." For just a fraction of a second, something flickered across Marcus's face. Julian, trained to read competitors across negotiating tables, caught it. The slight tightening around the eyes, the almost imperceptible shift in posture. Then it was gone, replaced by concern. "Jesus, do you know who?" "Not yet, but I'm going to fish them out soon." Julian moved to the sofa, sat across from Marcus, his body language all sharp angles and controlled fury. "I'm taking it to the board tomorrow morning. Whoever did this, I don't care how long the person's been working for me, or how much they've generated for this company. They're done, finished. I'll burn it all down if I have to." Marcus leaned forward, elbows on his knees, the picture of loyal concern. "Julian, maybe you should slow down. Think this through. If you go nuclear without solid proof, it could destabilize everything we've built. Stock prices, investor confidence, all of it. I didn't build this empire by letting people steal from me." Julian's voice was cold, final. "And I didn't get here by being afraid of the truth." Marcus studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "You're right. Of course you're right." He raised his glass. "To the truth, then, whatever it costs." They drank, and Julian didn't notice the way Marcus's jaw tightened, the way his friend's hand trembled almost imperceptibly before he set down his glass. On the desk nearby, a photograph sat in a silver frame. Julian at a charity gala, surrounded by Miami's elite, shaking hands and smiling that public smile that never reached his eyes. Alone, in a crowd of thousands. 12 hours later, Julian sat in the leather seat of his private helicopter, reviewing files on his tablet as the pilot guided them north toward Tampa. Below, the Everglades spread out in endless variations of green and brown, a labyrinth of mangroves and sawgrass and hidden waterways. He had a meeting with the board's chairman. Evidence compiled in encrypted files, enough to start a full investigation, enough to catch the thief. The pilot, a new hire Marcus had recommended just 2 weeks ago, kept his eyes forward. They were 40 minutes into the flight when the man's hand moved from the controls to his jacket. Julian looked up just as the gun came out. "Nothing personal, Mr. Blackwood," the pilot said, and there was genuine regret in his voice. "Just an order." Time seemed to slow and speed up simultaneously. Julian's mind raced through calculations, distances, angles. The gun was pointed at his chest, the pilot's hand steady. Outside, there was nothing but wilderness, no witnesses, no help. "Who ordered you?" Julian moved fast, years of boxing training overriding his fear. He grabbed for the gun, and the small space of the helicopter cabin erupted into chaos. They struggled, the helicopter lurching sickeningly to one side. The pilot's finger squeezed the trigger. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space, and Julian felt something hot tear across his ribs. Pain exploded through his side, but adrenaline kept him moving. He slammed the pilot's hand against the control panel once, twice, and the gun went skittering across the floor. But the helicopter was spinning now, the pilot's attention torn between fighting and flying. Alarms shrieked. The world outside the window tilted at an insane angle, green rushing up to meet them. Julian saw the pilot's eyes go wide with fear, realized the man hadn't planned to go down, too, and then they were falling. The impact scattered his thoughts like birds, metal screaming, the smell of fuel, something sharp driving into his skull. Then nothing. Dawn came to the Maca River like a whispered secret, all soft pink and gold, painting the surface of the water. Elena sat in her small fishing boat and watched her line drift in the current. At 29, she looked younger, her natural curls pulled back in a simple tie, her dark skin glowing in the early light. She wore old jeans and a tank top. No makeup, no jewelry, nothing that spoke of the life she'd left behind 3 years ago. The converted boathouse she called home sat behind her, barely visible through the cypress trees. It was off the grid, powered by solar panels she'd installed herself, cooled by the river breeze, and isolated enough that most people didn't know it existed. Perfect for someone who needed to disappear. The explosion, when it came, was distant but unmistakable. A dull thump that rattled across the water, followed by a plume of black smoke rising from the mangroves about 2 McWhirst northwest. Elena's first instinct was to ignore it. She'd spent 3 years perfecting the art of minding her own business, of not getting involved, of staying invisible. Whatever had just happened, it wasn't her problem. She pulled in her line, started the small outboard motor, and turned the boat toward home. But the smoke kept rising, thick and dark against the morning sky. And Elena, despite everything she'd been through, despite all the reasons she had to stay hidden, couldn't quite kill the part of her that had spent 6 years in medical school and 4 more in emergency rooms. The part that had taken an oath. "Damn it," she whispered, and turned the boat northwest. The mangroves were a maze, narrow channels that shifted with the seasons, branches that grabbed at her boat and her clothes as she navigated deeper. The smoke guided her, and the smell, jet fuel and burning plastic and something else, something organic. She'd smelled it before in the ER, trauma cases, the particular scent of a body in crisis. The helicopter, or what was left of it, had crashed in a small clearing where the mangroves thinned. The pilot was clearly dead, his body twisted at an angle that made Elena's stomach turn. But in the water, half submerged in the mud and sawgrass, she saw another shape. A man face down, one arm caught in the wreckage. Every survival instinct screamed at her to leave. This was how people got caught, how carefully constructed new lives fell apart. But her hands were already moving, tying off her boat, wading into the murky water that came up to her thighs. The man was heavy, clearly tall and muscular under his expensive suit, and it took all her strength to free him from the wreckage and turn him over. Blood matted his dark hair, streaming from a gash above his temple. More blood soaked his white shirt, torn open to reveal a muscular chest, and a bullet graze across his ribs. His face was all sharp angles and strong features, the kind of handsome that graced magazine covers and billboards. No ID visible, his pockets either empty or their contents lost in the crash. Elena pressed 2 fingers to his throat, felt a pulse, weak and thready. But there. "Okay," she said to no one. "Okay, you're not dying on me." Getting him to the boat was brutal work that left her gasping and soaked in sweat and river water. Getting him back to the boathouse took another 40 minutes of careful navigation, her mind racing the whole time. She should call the police, call the Coast Guard, call someone. But she couldn't, not without questions, not without explaining who she was and where she'd been, and why a doctor was living off the grid in a fishing shack. So she brought him home instead. Her boathouse had been a fish camp once, a single large room on stilts over the water, with a small loft bedroom, and a bathroom she'd renovated herself. It wasn't much, but it was clean and private. She had medical supplies, antibiotics she'd accumulated through careful trips to different pharmacies in different towns, always paying cash, never using insurance. She laid him on her bed, the only flat surface big enough, and went to work. The bullet wound was superficial, painful, but not life-threatening once she cleaned and dressed it. The head wound was more concerning. She shaved the area around the gash, irrigated it carefully, and stitched it closed with the same steady hands that had once worked trauma shifts at Miami General. Possible concussion, possible skull fracture, possible internal bleeding she couldn't detect without imaging equipment. All she could do was monitor him and hope. For 3 days, he burned with fever. Elena kept him hydrated through an IV she'd rigged, changed his dressings, sponged his forehead with cool water when his temperature spiked. She slept in the chair beside the bed, startling awake at every shift in his breathing. During the day, she studied him, this stranger she'd pulled from the swamp. His hands were strong but well kept. No calluses except for a pattern on his knuckles that looked like boxing training. His body was sculpted, the kind of physique that took time and money to maintain. The clothes she'd cut off him were custom-tailored Italian labels worth more than she'd spent on rent in the last 6 months. Whoever he was wealthy, which meant people would be looking for him. In her drawer, hidden under spare clothes, newspaper clippings yellowed with age told her own story. ER doctor wanted for questioning in suspicious death. Her face, younger and more hopeful, stared out from the newsprint. She'd been Dr. Elena then, rising star in emergency medicine, engaged to a fellow doctor, her whole future mapped out like a well-marked highway. Then Silas Vane had come into her ER, clutching his chest, and everything had fallen apart. On the 3rd night, she woke to the sound of gasping. The man in her bed was conscious, his eyes a striking pale blue that seemed to glow in the lamplight, wide with panic and confusion. His hand shot out and grabbed her wrist with surprising strength, his whole body rigid with fight-or-flight response. Hey, it's okay," Elena said, keeping her voice calm and professional despite her racing heart. "You're safe. You were in an accident. I'm a doctor. I've been taking care of you." His grip didn't loosen, but she saw the panic fade slightly, replaced by something else. Confusion. He looked around the room at the rough wooden walls and simple furnishings, then back at her. His lips moved, forming words that came out rough from disuse. "Where am I?" "My home, near the Maca River in Florida. You crashed in a helicopter. I pulled you out." She kept her voice steady, reassuring. "You've been unconscious for 3 days." He stared at her, and she watched his face carefully, looking for signs of recognition, memory, anything. What she saw instead made her chest tighten with professional concern and something else, something she didn't want to examine too closely. "What's your name?" he asked. "Elena." "Dr. Elena." "No," he said, and his voice cracked. "What's my name?" The question hung in the air between them. Elena felt her stomach drop. "You don't know?" His hand finally released her wrist, moving to his head, where she'd stitched the wound. I don't remember. I don't remember anything." His breathing quickened, panic returning. "My name, where I'm from, what I was doing, it's all just nothing. Empty. Why can't I remember?" Elena moved carefully, sitting on the edge of the bed, close enough to monitor him, but far enough not to crowd. "The head trauma. You had a significant injury. Amnesia isn't uncommon, especially with the fever you've been fighting. It might be temporary, might be." She met his eyes and saw real fear there, raw and vulnerable in a way that made him look younger than the lines around his eyes suggested. "I won't lie to you. I don't know. I don't have the equipment here to properly assess you, but your vitals are stable. The wound is healing well. Memory can come back in pieces or all at once. Sometimes the brain just needs time." He looked down at himself, at the bandages wrapped around his ribs and head, at his own hands like they belonged to a stranger. "Who am I?" "I don't know," Elena admitted. "You had no ID on you. Your clothes were expensive. Your watch was a Patek Philippe before it got destroyed in the crash. You're clearly someone with money. I've been keeping the radio on, listening for reports of missing persons, plane crashes, anything. But so far, nothing." "Nothing," he repeated the word hollowly. Then his eyes found hers again, and something in his expression shifted. Despite the fear and confusion, he really looked at her for the first time. "You saved my life. I did what anyone would do. We both know that's not true." His voice was getting stronger, and she could hear intelligence under the confusion, a sharp mind working to piece together fragments. "You live out here alone, off the grid from the looks of it. No hospital, no police. You could have left me there and no one would have known." Elena stood suddenly, needing distance. "You should rest. Your body's been through trauma. Why did you save me?" The question stopped her at the bathroom door. She looked back at him, this beautiful stranger in her bed, and told him a partial truth. "Because I'm a doctor. It's what I do." Over the next several days, Elena established a routine that felt dangerously domestic. She'd wake early, check his vitals, change his dressings. He was healing remarkably well, his body recovering with the resilience of someone who'd always been healthy and strong. The fever broke completely on day 5. By day 7, he was sitting up, eating solid food, moving around the small boathouse with increasing confidence. But the memories didn't return. She started calling him Wilder, half as a joke because she'd pulled him from the wilderness, half because he needed something to answer to. He accepted it with a wry smile that transformed his face from handsome to devastating. "Wilder," he said, testing it out. "Could be worse, I suppose." "Could be Swamp Thing," Elena offered, and was rewarded with a laugh, genuine and warm. She taught him her world because there was nothing else to do. How to check the solar panels, how to purify water from the river, how to catch bass and catfish in the early morning when the light was soft. He was a quick study, his hands seeming to know things his mind didn't. He tied fishing knots with practiced ease, fixed the temperamental outboard motor with mechanical intuition that surprised them both. Muscle memory, Elena explained, watching him work. Your body remembers, even if your conscious mind doesn't. They fell into an easy rhythm, or what would have been easy if not for the tension that seemed to thicken the air between them. Elena told herself it was natural. Two people in close quarters, nothing more, but she couldn't ignore the way her pulse quickened when he emerged from the outdoor shower, water sleeking down his muscular back. Couldn't pretend she didn't notice the way his eyes followed her around the room, intense and assessing in a way that made her skin feel too tight. One humid afternoon in the second week, she found him at the outdoor washing basin, stripped to the waist, scrubbing his face and neck. The sun caught the water droplets on his skin, highlighting every sculpted muscle, the flat plane of his stomach, the V of muscle that disappeared into his worn jeans. The scar on his ribs was healing into a pink line. But she noticed another scar, older, near his shoulder, a bullet wound, fully healed, at least a few years old. Wilder wasn't just wealthy, he was dangerous. She must have made a sound because he looked up, catching her staring. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then he straightened slowly, his eyes never leaving hers, and Elena's mouth went dry. I brought you a towel, she stuttered, holding it out. He moved toward her with the fluid grace of a predator, and Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. When he took the towel, his fingers brushed hers, and it felt like touching a live wire. They both froze, the innocent contact somehow loaded with electricity. Do you feel that? He asked, his voice low and rough. Or am I losing my mind along with my memory? Elena knew she should step back, should laugh it off, should maintain the professional distance she'd been clinging to like a lifeline. So she chose not to respond. His eyes darkened, and he moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his skin. He could smell the simple soap she'd given him, mixed with something essentially male. Why do you keep running away from me? Because you don't know who you are, she said, but her voice shook. What if you have someone waiting for you? A wife, a girlfriend, someone? He glanced down at his left hand, bare of any ring or tan line. I don't feel like I belong to anyone. I don't feel anything from before, except... He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a curl from her face. Except this. This feels real. You feel real. Elena did step back then, her professional training finally kicking in through the haze of attraction. You're confused. Trauma can cause attachment to caregivers. It's a documented phenomenon. Is that your medical opinion, Dr. Elena? Something like amusement flickered across his face despite the tension. That I'm experiencing some kind of psychological transference. It's a possibility you should consider. Considered and rejected, he said simply. This isn't gratitude, Elena. I don't have words for what this is. Everything from before is blank, but when I look at you, I feel like I'm finally seeing clearly for the first time. The intensity in his gaze made her chest ache. She wanted to believe him, wanted to close the distance between them and give in to the magnetic pull that seemed to get stronger every day. But she couldn't. Not like this. Wilder, please. You're recovering. We can't do this. Can't or won't. Both. Neither. I don't know. She wrapped her arms around herself. Just give yourself time. Give us time. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Okay, time. I can do that. But the way he looked at her, like she was the only fixed point in his spinning world, suggested that time might not change anything at all. That night, Elena lay in her loft bedroom, staring at the ceiling and listening to Wilder move restlessly in the bed below. She'd given him the main room and taken the smaller loft space, needing the physical separation even if it did nothing to quiet her racing thoughts. She knew she was playing with fire. Every day he stayed was another day she risked discovery. Another day her carefully constructed isolation cracked a little more. But more than that, she was terrified of what she felt. It had been 3 years since she'd let herself feel anything beyond basic survival. 3 years since she'd trusted anyone, touched anyone, let anyone close enough to hurt her. And here was this man, this beautiful mystery, who looked at her like she hung the moon, and she wanted to fall into him so badly it hurt. Around 2 in the morning, she heard him cry out, a nightmare. She climbed down the loft ladder and found him tangled in sheets, his body rigid, muttering words she couldn't make out. When she touched his shoulder, his eyes flew open, wild and unseeing. "Hey, you're safe," she said softly. "You were dreaming." He focused on her slowly, recognition dawning. "Elena," he sat up, running a shaking hand through his hair. "Sorry, there was someone, a face I almost recognized, and glass breaking, and I felt betrayed, angry. Then it was gone. The memories might start coming back in dreams first," she said, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. "Professional distance," she reminded herself. "It's actually a good sign." "Didn't feel good," he said roughly, then quieter. "Stay, please. Just for a minute. I don't want to be left alone." Every rational thought told her to go back upstairs, to maintain boundaries, to protect herself. Instead, she found herself nodding. "Just until you fall asleep." He lay back down, and she sat there, perched on the edge of the mattress like a bird ready to flee. Then his hand found hers in the darkness, fingers intertwining, and Elena's breath caught. It was such a simple thing, holding hands, innocent. But the warmth of his palm against hers, the gentle pressure of his fingers, the implicit trust in the gesture, it unraveled something inside her chest. They stayed like that, not speaking, just breathing in sync in the quiet darkness. Outside, the river lapped gently against the pilings. An owl called from the cypress trees. And Elena felt a dangerous kind of peace settle over her. The kind that came from giving in, from lowering defenses, from admitting that maybe she wasn't as alone as she'd convinced herself to be. She felt when his breathing deepened and evened out, when sleep finally claimed him. She should have left then, should have reclaimed her hand and retreated to the safety of her loft. Instead, she stayed, her fingers laced with his, and watched the shadows move across his face until dawn painted the windows gold. 2 weeks after she'd pulled him from the wreckage, Elena admitted to herself that she was in serious trouble. Not the running for her life kind of trouble she'd been dealing with for 3 years, but something potentially more dangerous. She was falling for Wilder, this man with no past and an uncertain future, and she didn't know how to stop. They'd settled into something that felt like partnership. He'd taken over the heavier work around the boathouse, fixing the dock railing she'd been meaning to repair for months, reinforcing the solar panel mounts, cleaning fish with the kind of precision that spoke of practiced hands. She caught him sometimes staring at his own fingers with a puzzled expression, like he was trying to reconcile what they could do with what he couldn't remember learning. The heat of late summer pressed down on Central Florida like a heavy blanket, making even the shade feel oppressive, which was how they ended up in the river one scorching afternoon. Both of them desperate for relief from the humidity that made the air feel solid. Elena wore a simple tank top and shorts, her hair piled on top of her head. Wilder had stripped down to his jeans, his torso still marked with healing scars, but undeniably beautiful in the dappled sunlight filtering through the cypress canopy. They'd waded out to where the water was chest-deep and cool, moving slow, and for a while they just existed in comfortable silence. Then Elena looked up and caught him staring. Not the furtive glances he'd been stealing for days, but an open, unguarded look of such raw want that it sent heat through her despite the cool water. "You're staring," she said, her voice coming out breathier than she intended. "I know," he said simply, making no effort to look away. "I can't help it. You're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen, at least that I can remember." Elena laughed despite the flutter in her stomach. Smooth for a man with no memory. He moved closer, water creating gentle ripples between them, his eyes never leaving hers. "Elena, I know I don't have the right to want you. I don't even know my own name. I could be a terrible person. I could have people waiting. I could be all wrong for you in ways neither of us can see yet." "Wilder," she started. But he kept talking, his voice low and intense. "But I really can't hide my feelings anymore and pretend I'm not falling for you. Every time you're near me, every time you smile, every time your hand brushes mine, I feel like I'm burning from the inside out. And I know you feel it too. I can see it in the way you look at me when you think I'm not watching." Her heart was pounding so hard she was sure he could hear it. "This isn't right." "I know, but I also need to know if you share even just a fragment of my feelings," he said, close enough now that she could see water droplets caught in his eyelashes. "Tell me I'm alone in this, and I'll stop. I'll keep my distance. I'll be whatever you need me to be. But tell me honestly, Elena, because I can't keep pretending this isn't eating me alive." She opened her mouth to give him all the rational reasons why this was a bad idea, to explain about trauma bonding and isolation, and the impossibility of building something real on such shaky ground. But what came out instead was, I can't tell you that." The space between them disappeared. He pulled her against him, and she gasped at the full body contact, skin on skin, the hard planes of his chest against her softness. For one suspended moment, they just stared at each other, the enormity of the line they were about to cross hanging heavy in the air. Then he kissed her, and thought became impossible. It wasn't gentle or tentative. It was desperate and hungry. 3 weeks of tension exploding between them. His mouth moved over hers like he was dying and she was oxygen, his hands sliding up her back into her hair. Elena melted into him, her own hands exploring the muscular landscape of his shoulders, his neck, the strong line of his jaw. He made a sound low in his throat, somewhere between a groan and a growl, and lifted her like she weighed nothing. Her legs wrapped around his waist instinctively, and the new position pressed them together in a way that made them both gasp. She felt him hard against her, felt her own body responding with an intensity that should have terrified her. "Elena," he breathed against her mouth, then kissed along her jaw, down her neck, finding the sensitive spot below her ear that made her whimper. "Tell me to stop, because if you don't, I'm going to make you mine right here." She was trembling, every nerve ending on fire, teetering on the edge of surrender. His mouth was doing sinful things to her throat. His hands gripped her thighs, and she wanted nothing more than to give in, to let this happen, to stop thinking and just feel. Then her phone rang. The sound was jarring. Impossible. She kept the phone off most of the time. The battery barely maintained because who was there to call? But she'd turned it on this morning out of habit, checking the weather, and she must have forgotten to power it back down. "Ignore it," Wilder said against her skin, his lips moving to her collarbone. But something about the ring cut through the haze of desire. Elena's survival instincts, honed over 3 years of hiding, screamed at her. "Wait," she managed. "Wait! Stop!" He stopped immediately, breathing hard, his forehead dropping to her shoulder. "Elena, I need... Just let me check," she said, already hating herself for the interruption. He lowered her carefully back to her feet, and she immediately missed his heat. She waded to the riverbank where she'd left her phone on a towel, and her blood ran cold when she saw the screen. Emergency alert. Missing billionaire Julian Blackwood, 35, still missing 2 weeks after helicopter disappearance over Everglades. Below the text, a photo. A man in an expensive suit at some charity event. Powerful and cold and commanding. A face she'd been staring at for 2 weeks, though she'd never seen it wear that particular expression. All business, and no warmth. "What is it?" he asked, moving through the water toward her. Elena's hands shook as she turned the phone so he could see. "I think I know who you are." Back at the boathouse, wrapped in towels, the charged atmosphere from the river replaced by shocked silence, Elena pulled up everything she could find on her phone's spotty internet connection. With each article, each photo, each detail, the man she'd been calling Wilder became someone else entirely. Julian Blackwood, billionaire pharmaceutical executive, owner of Blackwood Industries, an empire worth over $2 billion for 35 years old, unmarried, notoriously private. Last seen boarding his private helicopter for a business meeting in Tampa. The helicopter had never arrived. Searchers had found minimal wreckage, no bodies, and the official status was missing, presumed dead. I was this. He stared at the phone screen showing him at various galas and business events, always in expensive suits, always with that cold, controlled expression. "This is who I am." "According to this, yes. Julian Blackwood, you own half of Miami." He scrolled through images, his expression growing more troubled with each one. "I look miserable." Elena had noticed that too. In every photo, even the ones where he was shaking hands or accepting awards, there was a hardness to him, an isolation that seemed almost deliberate. "You look powerful. Powerful and alone," he said quietly. Then he stopped on one image, his body going rigid. "Him. I know him." The photo showed Julian with another man, both in suits, both smiling for the camera. The caption read, "Julian Blackwood and Marcus Sterling, best friends since college, transform pharmaceutical industry." "Marcus Sterling," Elena read, "your COO and apparently your best friend." "I see him in my nightmares," Julian said, his voice hollow. "His face, and I feel betrayed, angry. What if he's the one who— what if the helicopter crash wasn't an accident?" Elena's medical mind immediately wanted to caution him about false memories, about the brain filling in gaps with imagination. But the helicopter had been shot down. There had been a gun in the wreckage, and that bullet graze on his ribs suggested violence. "We need to figure out what really happened," she said carefully. But Julian was still scrolling, and he stopped on another image, a stunning blonde woman in a designer gown standing close to him at some event. The caption, "Julian Blackwood and ex-fiancée Sienna Montgomery maintain friendly relationship despite split." Elena's stomach dropped. "You had someone. What?" Julian stared at the photo for a long time, and Elena held her breath, waiting for recognition, for memory, for some sign that the woman in the picture meant something to him. Instead, he looked up at her with those piercing blue eyes and said, "I don't know her. I don't remember knowing her." "You were engaged to her." "Maybe I was. But when I look at this picture, I see a stranger standing next to someone I don't recognize. It's like looking at actors in a movie." He set the phone down deliberately and moved closer to Elena. "But when I look at you, I feel everything. My whole body knows you, even if my brain doesn't know itself." "Julian," she said, testing his real name on her tongue. "What if I don't want that life?" He was right in front of her now, his hands coming up to frame her face with infinite gentleness. "What if I want this?" You don't mean that. You're confused. You're isolated. It's natural to form attachments under these circumstances." "Stop analyzing me like I'm one of your patients," he said, a hint of frustration breaking through. "You're not my doctor right now, Elena. You're the woman I'm falling in love with." The words hung in the air between them. Love. He'd said love. Elena felt tears prick her eyes because this was impossible. All of it. He was a billionaire who owned half of Miami, and she was a fugitive doctor living in a shack. His life was private helicopters and pharmaceutical empires, and hers was fishing for dinner and praying no one recognized her face. They existed in completely different worlds, and whatever this thing was between them, it couldn't survive contact with reality. "You don't know me," she whispered. "Then let me know you," he said fiercely. "I want to know everything about you, not the woman who's been hiding from her past, not the doctor who saved me, but you, the real you. How do you know that?" "Because you are a great doctor, Elena, with the kindest of hearts. What else would someone like you live in a remote area like this? It definitely means you're running from something." His thumbs brushed her cheekbones. "Whatever you're running from, I don't care. You saved my life. You gave me shelter. You made me feel human when I didn't even know my own name. That's all I need to know." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the tears escape despite her best efforts. "You're going to regret this when your memory comes back, when you remember what your real life is like." "Then I'll remember falling in love with you," he said simply. "And I can't imagine that being a regret." He kissed her soft and sweet, tasting the salt of her tears. It was nothing like the desperate hunger in the river. This was a promise, a claim, a declaration. Elena kissed him back, her hands fisting in his shirt, and let herself believe just for a moment that this could be real, that this beautiful, broken man could actually choose her over the empire waiting for him in Miami. When they finally pulled apart, she rested her forehead against his chest and felt his heartbeat strong and steady. "What happens now?" "Now," he said into her hair, "we figure out what really happened to that helicopter. Because if someone tried to kill me once, they'll try again. And I need to know who and why before I can decide anything about the future." That made sense. That was logical. But Elena couldn't shake the feeling that once they opened this door, once they stepped back into his real world, everything between them would shatter like glass. That night, neither of them could sleep. They sat on the dock, feet dangling over the water, shoulders touching. Julian. Elena still thought of him as both names now. Her Wilder and the stranger Julian Blackwood had been quiet for hours. Processing, she assumed, trying to reconcile the man he'd become over 2 weeks with the man in those photos. "Tell me about Apex Pharma," he said suddenly. Elena startled. "What?" "In the articles, my company, Blackwood Industries, was negotiating with a company called Apex." Elena's blood ran cold. Of all the companies, all the names he could have fixated on, it had to be that one. "Why are you asking about Apex?" "I don't know. Just a feeling. Like there's something I'm supposed to remember about them." He looked at her, and even in the darkness she could feel the intensity of his gaze. "You reacted to the name. Why?" She should have lied, should have deflected, but she was so tired of secrets. And if they were going to do this, if they were going to try to build something real, it had to be built on truth. 3 years ago, she said slowly, I was an ER doctor at Miami General. One night a man came in, a pharmaceutical executive named Silas Vane. Heart attack symptoms, rapid decline. Nothing we did helped. He died on my table. Julian listened without interrupting, his hand finding hers. Later, when I was filling out paperwork, I noticed inconsistencies. His blood work showed compounds that didn't match any medication he was supposed to be on. I started asking questions, did some digging. Silas Vane worked for Apex Pharma. I found evidence suggesting he'd been poisoned. Jesus, Julian breathed. Before I could take it to the police, men showed up at my apartment. They knew what I'd found. They told me to forget what I saw or I'd be next. They had photos of me, of my routine, of people I loved. The message was clear. She laughed bitterly. So I ran, changed my name, changed my life, ended up here. I've been hiding ever since. Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then he pulled her against him, his arm around her shoulders. Apex Pharma, the name in my nightmares. Elena, what if we're connected? What if I was investigating them? What if that's why someone wanted me dead? The pieces were falling into place, a conspiracy bigger than either of them. If you were looking into Apex, if you found something that threatened them, or whoever's working with them. Marcus, Julian said with certainty. It has to be Marcus. He was my COO. He'd have access to everything. If he was selling out to Apex, embezzling money, covering up illegal trials or worse, then you finding out would destroy him, Elena finished. So he tried to kill you. They sat with that terrible knowledge, the river moving endlessly beneath them. Finally, Julian spoke, his voice rough with emotion. You saved my life, and now you're in danger because of me. If anyone connected to Apex finds out you're here, if they realize you witnessed that murder 3 years ago and you're with me now. We don't know that they know, Elena said, but her voice lacked conviction. We can't risk it. We need to be smart about this. He turned her to face him, his hands on her shoulders. I should go back to Miami, confront Marcus, figure out what's really happening. But I need you safe first. Is there somewhere you can go? Someone you trust? There's no one, Elena admitted. And I'm not leaving you to walk into danger alone, Julian. These people are willing to kill. They've already tried once with me. They've already threatened you, which is exactly why you need someone watching your back. She set her jaw stubbornly. I'm not some helpless damsel, Julian. I survived 3 years on my own. We do this together or not at all. He stared at her, and she watched emotions flicker across his face. Frustration, fear, something that might have been pride. Then he kissed her, hard and fierce. You're impossible. You're arrogant, she shot back. We're going to get each other killed. Probably, he laughed, the sound startling them both. Okay, together. But we need a plan. Evidence. Something concrete before we go back to Miami. We can't just show up and accuse a billionaire of attempted murder without proof. They spent the next 2 days planning, researching, building a timeline of events. Julian's memories were still mostly absent, just fragments and feelings. But the nightmares were getting more frequent and detailed. He remembered arguing with Marcus about money, about ethical lines being crossed. Remembered finding discrepancies in financial reports. Remembered the moment before the crash with crystalline clarity. The pilot's gun, the fall. Elena watched him piece himself together, and she saw the man from those photos starting to emerge. The cold competence, the strategic mind. It should have worried her, this glimpse of who Julian Blackwood really was. Instead, it made her want him more because she'd seen him at his most vulnerable, and knew that beneath the billionaire armor was a man capable of real feeling. One evening, she found him on the dock, staring at nothing, tension radiating from every line of his body. What are you thinking? She asked, settling beside him. He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, that I should take you back to Miami, to my real life. Show you what that world is like before you make any decisions about us. I've already made my decision. You've made a decision about Wilder, the man with no past who fishes and fixes solar panels. But you don't know Julian Blackwood, the man who built an empire by being ruthless, who treated people like assets and relationships like business transactions. What if you don't like that man? Elena turned him to face her. Do you really think you can separate yourself like that? You're not two different people. You're both the man you were and the man you're becoming. And She took a breath, steadying herself. I'm choosing all of it. All of you. His eyes searched hers. Why? Because when you look at me, you see me, not what I used to be, not the mistakes I've made, just me. And no one's done that in 3 years. She reached up to touch his face. Because you make me feel brave enough to stop hiding. Because when I think about going back to being alone, to living half a life, it feels like drowning. Elena. He breathed her name like a prayer, and then he was kissing her, deep and claiming, his hands in her hair. When he pulled back, his voice was rough. I need you. Not tomorrow. Not when I figure everything out, right now. Tell me you want this, too. I do want it. He stood, pulling her up with him, and lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing. Elena wrapped her arms around his neck as he carried her inside, laying her on the bed with infinite care. For a moment, he just looked at her, his eyes dark with want, and something deeper, something that made her chest ache. You're sure? He asked, even as his hand traced the line of her jaw, her throat, down to where her pulse beat frantically. I'm sure. Are you? I've never been more sure of anything in my life, memory or no memory. He settled beside her, his body pressing hers into the mattress. I want you so much I can barely think straight. Tell me what you need. Just you. I need you. He kissed her slow and deep, taking his time like they had all the time in the world instead of this fragile, stolen moment. His hands moved over her body, learning every curve, every place that made her gasp. Elena explored him in return, the hard muscles of his back, the sharp line of his hip. He groaned into her mouth when she touched him through his jeans, his hips jerking involuntarily. Clothes disappeared in a tangle of impatient hands and breathless laughter. When there was nothing between them but heat and want, Julian paused again, his forehead resting against hers. The first touch of skin on skin was electric. He moved against her, over her, in her, and Elena stopped thinking entirely. There was just sensation. The delicious friction, the building heat, the sound of his voice rough in her ear, telling her how beautiful she was, how perfect, how much he'd been dreaming of this. She wrapped herself around him, legs and arms, holding him as close as physics would allow, and let herself fall. After, wrapped in sheets, sweaty and trembling and satisfied in a way she'd forgotten was possible, Julian held her against his chest and pressed kisses to her temple, her hair anywhere he could reach. You're special to me, he said quietly, fiercely. Whatever else I forgot, I'm never forgetting this. Never forgetting you. Elena traced patterns on his chest, feeling his heartbeat slow. I need to tell you something about why I'm really here hiding. You told me about Apex, the man who died, the threats. There's more. She took a breath. His name was Silas Vane. When I found the evidence of poisoning, I also found trial records. Apex was running illegal drug trials on people, mostly poor, mostly desperate. They'd pay them cash, run experiments, and if there were complications... She felt sick remembering. They'd eliminate them, make it look like heart attacks or accidents. Silas Vane had found out, was going to blow the whistle, so they killed him. Julian went very still beneath her. You found proof of this? I had proof. Medical records, financial transactions. I hid copies before I ran, but I've been too afraid to do anything with them. If I surface, if I go to the authorities, the people who threatened me will come after me again. His arm tightened around her. Elena. Apex Pharma. I've been trying to remember. In the articles, Blackwood Industries was in merger talks with Apex. What if Marcus was planning to sell my company to the people who murdered your patient? What if that's what I found out? The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. We're both loose ends. Not just loose ends, we're evidence. You witnessed their crimes 3 years ago. I was investigating them when someone tried to kill me. If anyone realizes we're together, that we're comparing notes." "We're dead," Elena said flatly. Julian rolled, pinning her gently beneath him, his eyes fierce. No, I won't let that happen. You hear me? I just found you. I just figured out what it feels like to actually care about another person. And I am not losing you to some corporate murderers." "Julian, they have money, power, connections." "So do I," he said. And for the first time, she saw the billionaire in him, the man who'd built an empire. "I have resources they don't know about. People who owe me favors, contingencies. I didn't get to where I am by being easy to kill. They already tried once and I survived. Because you saved me." He kissed her softly. "Now let me save you back. Let me protect you." Elena wanted to argue, wanted to insist she didn't need protecting. But the truth was, she'd been running scared for 3 years, looking over her shoulder, jumping at shadows. And here was this man, this impossible, beautiful man, offering to stand between her and the monsters. How could she say no to that? "Okay," she whispered. "Together." "Together," he promised. "When this is over, I'm taking you so far away from here. Somewhere no one can find us, somewhere safe. And I'm going to spend every single day making you forget you were ever afraid." She believed him, which was either the smartest or stupidest thing she'd ever done. But lying there in his arms, feeling his heart beat against hers, Elena chose to believe, chose to hope, chose to let herself love this man who'd crashed into her life and turned everything upside down. Outside, night sounds filled the air, frogs and insects, and the endless whisper of the river. Inside, they held each other close. 2 broken people trying to make something whole. And for now, for tonight, that was enough. The next morning arrived with deceptive calm. Sunlight streaming through the boathouse windows like nothing in the world had changed. But everything had changed. Elena woke wrapped in Julian's arms, his breath warm against her neck. And for a moment, she let herself pretend this was normal, that they were just 2 people in love without billion-dollar conspiracies and murder attempts hanging over their heads. Then Julian's body went rigid against hers. "Someone's coming," he whispered, already moving, pulling on jeans with the kind of efficiency that spoke of danger training she'd never seen him use. 2 vehicles, maybe 3. I can hear them on the access road." Elena's heart slammed against her ribs. The access road was barely a road, more like a glorified path that most people didn't even know existed. No one came out here by accident. She scrambled out of bed, throwing on clothes, her mind racing through possibilities. Local authorities wouldn't send multiple vehicles. Tourists wouldn't know how to find this place, which meant whoever was coming, they were looking specifically for them. Julian was already at the window, peering through a gap in the curtains. His entire body language shifted into something predatory and alert. This wasn't Wilder, the gentleman who'd learned to fish and fix solar panels. This was Julian Blackwood, and Elena could suddenly see exactly how he'd built an empire. Black SUVs, professional. 3 vehicles, probably 6 to 8 men. "Police?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. "Private security?" His jaw was tight. Expensive private security. They heard the vehicles stop, doors opening, the crunch of boots on gravel. Julian moved to the door, positioning himself between Elena and whatever was coming, and she saw his hand close around a fishing knife, the only weapon they had. It was pathetic against what sounded like a small army, but his grip was sure, his stance balanced. The knock, when it came, was almost polite. "Mr. Blackwood," a man's voice called through the door, professional and calm. "My name is Jax, head of Blackwood Industries Security. Everyone's been looking for you, sir. We're here to bring you home." Julian's eyes met Elena's, a whole conversation passing between them in that glance. "Trust no one. Stay close. Be ready to run." "Jax," Julian called back. His voice transformed into something commanding and cold. "I remember you. I also remember why I ended up in that helicopter. And it wasn't an accident. So, forgive me if I'm not eager to go anywhere with you." A pause. Then Jax again. And Elena could hear the careful calculation in his tone. "Sir, you've been through significant trauma. It's natural to be confused, paranoid even. But Mr. Sterling has been devastated by your disappearance. The whole company has. Let us bring you home safely. Get you proper medical attention." "Marcus," Julian said, and Elena heard the rage simmering under the word. "Marcus tried to kill me. I remember everything, Jax. The embezzlement, the Apex deal, all of it." Another pause, longer this time. When Jax spoke again, his voice had changed, lost some of that professional warmth. "Mr. Blackwood, I have orders. You can come willingly, or we can make this difficult. Your choice." Julian looked at Elena, and she saw the calculation in his eyes, weighing options, running through scenarios. They were outgunned, trapped, with nowhere to run except the river and mangroves against trained security personnel. They'd be caught in minutes. "What about the woman?" Julian called out. "Dr. Thorne saved my life. She's not part of this." "Our orders include Dr. Thorne as well," Jax said, and Elena's blood ran cold. They knew who she was, which meant Marcus knew, which meant Apex knew. "No one gets hurt if you both come quietly." Julian turned to her, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "When I move, you run for the boat, the river, into the mangroves, as deep as you can go. Don't look back." "I'm not leaving you," Elena hissed. "You don't have a choice. If they take us both, we're dead. At least if you run, you have a chance." He touched her face, quick and fierce. "Please, Elena, let me protect you this once." Before she could argue, Julian yanked open the door. Jax stood on the other side, exactly as professional as he sounded, 40-some with military bearing and eyes that had seen too much. Behind him, 5 other men in tactical gear, hands on weapons, but not drawn. "I'll come with you," Julian said, stepping out onto the porch. "But she stays. She has nothing to do with Blackwood Industries or Marcus or any of this." Jax's eyes flicked to Elena, visible through the doorway, and something in his expression shifted. Not quite sympathy, but close. "I'm afraid that's not possible, Mr. Blackwood. We have very specific orders regarding Dr. Thorne." "What orders?" Julian demanded. "What does Marcus want with her?" "That's not for me to say. Now, we can do this easy or hard. Your call." Then Julian's hand moved so fast Elena almost missed it. 1 second Jax was standing relaxed. The next Julian had twisted his arm, disarmed him, and had the man's own weapon pressed against his spine. The other security personnel immediately drew their guns, but Julian had positioned Jax as a shield. "New plan," Julian said, his voice absolutely deadly. "You're going to let us walk to that boat. Anyone tries to stop us, your boss gets a bullet in the spine. Everyone understand?" Elena's medical training immediately cataloged what that would mean. Permanent paralysis, loss of function, a catastrophic injury. She wanted to tell Julian he wouldn't really do it, but looking at his face, cold and merciless, she wasn't sure. Jax, to his credit, stayed calm. "You won't shoot me, Mr. Blackwood. That's not who you are. You want to bet your spinal cord on what kind of man I am?" Julian pressed the gun harder. "Elena, move, now!" She ran, grabbing her emergency bag, always packed because paranoia had kept her alive this long. Behind her, she heard Julian backing down the porch steps, Jax still locked against him. The other security men tracked their movement with weapons but didn't fire, professional enough not to risk their commander. They made it to the boat, Elena jumping in and starting the outboard motor with shaking hands. Julian shoved Jax away hard and leaped into the boat as she gunned the engine. Bullets hit the water around them. Controlled fire meant to stop, not kill, but terrifying nonetheless. Julian crouched low, returning fire to keep their heads down. And then they were into the mangrove channels where the SUVs couldn't follow. "Are you insane?" Elena shouted over the motor. "You could have gotten us both killed." "They weren't going to shoot while I had Jax," Julian shouted back, checking the gun's ammunition with practiced ease that said he'd done this before many times. "And they won't kill us outright. Marcus needs to know what I remember, what I've told you, what evidence we might have. We're worth more alive, at least for now." Elena navigated through the narrow waterways, branches scraping the boat, her heart still hammering. "Where are we going?" "Away from here. Anywhere but here." Julian scanned behind them, watching for pursuit. "They'll have boats in the water within the hour. We need distance, and we need a plan." They traveled for over an hour, deeper into the Everglades than Elena had ever gone, until they found an abandoned fishing shack on stilts, half collapsed, but still standing. They tied off the boat and climbed inside, both of them running on adrenaline and fear. The shack was barely 4 walls and a roof, empty except for debris and old fishing nets. But it was shelter, and it was isolated, and for now that was enough. Julian immediately moved to the windows, such as they were, checking sightlines and approaches. Elena sank onto the floor, her legs suddenly unable to hold her. "They knew my name. They knew exactly who I am." Julian turned to her, and his expression softened from tactical to concerned in a heartbeat. He crossed the small space and pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I know. I'm sorry. God, Elena, I'm so sorry I brought this to your door." She clutched his shirt, breathing in his scent, trying to calm her racing heart. "Not your fault. I chose to save you. I chose to stay with you. I chose all of this. You chose before you knew what it would cost." He pulled back enough to look at her, his hands framing her face. "But I promise you, I swear on everything I am, I will get you out of this, whatever it takes." Elena corrected. "We'll get out of this. Stop trying to be the hero who sacrifices himself." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Can't help it. You make me want to be better than I was. Better than those cold photos of a man who built walls so high no one could reach him." "I like the man you're becoming," she said softly. "But I also need you to stay alive, so maybe less throwing yourself into danger." "I'll take it under advisement." He kissed her forehead, gentle and reverent, then her cheeks, her nose, finally her mouth. It was sweet and desperate at the same time, a reminder that they were alive, they were together, they still had a chance. When they broke apart, Julian's phone, which he'd retrieved from the boathouse before they fled, buzzed with a notification. He pulled it out, frowned at the screen. "News alert. Marcus just held a press conference about the merger with Apex Pharma. It's official. Blackwood Industries and Apex are now one company with Marcus as CEO. Or..." He scrolled through the article, his jaw tightening with each line. "He's selling it as fulfilling my vision, honoring my legacy. The bastard is literally profiting from my murder." Elena took the phone, reading the details. "Wait, look at this. The merger includes something called Project Renewal, pharmaceutical trials aimed at underserved communities in rural Florida." Their eyes met as the implications sank in. "They're going to do it again," Elena said. "Whatever illegal trials killed Silas Vane and who knows how many others, they're going to expand it. Use my former company's resources and reputation to cover their crimes." Julian stood abruptly, pacing the small space like a caged animal. "We have to stop this. We have to expose them." "With what evidence? Everything I had is hidden, and even if we could get to it, we'd have to surface. The moment we do, they'll know. Then we make them come to us." Julian's eyes had that sharp, calculating look again. We have something they desperately need. What? Me. Alive. With my memory. I'm a walking, talking inconvenience to Marcus's entire plan. As long as I'm out here, I'm a threat. So, we use that. Elena didn't like where this was going. Julian, if you're thinking of offering yourself as bait, not just me, us. He crouched in front of her, taking her hands. We contact someone, not Marcus, but someone who might still be loyal to the real Blackwood Industries. Someone who can help us gather evidence from the inside while we draw Marcus out. Who? He thought for a moment. Sienna Montgomery, my ex-fiancée. We ended things amicably, and she has her own money, her own power. She's not under Marcus's thumb. Elena tried very hard not to feel a spike of jealousy at the idea of turning to his beautiful ex-fiancée for help. Failed completely. You sure you can trust her? Julian caught the tone, and his expression turned knowing. Elena, look at me. I don't remember being engaged to her. I don't remember loving her or even liking her particularly. For all I know, we barely tolerated each other. But I remember, all my instincts tell me that she's smart and she's ruthless, and she doesn't like being played. If Marcus cut her out of this deal, she'll want revenge. So, we're betting our lives on a woman scorned. Do you have a better idea? She didn't. Elena pulled out her own phone, the burner she'd been using for 3 years, and handed it to him. Make the call, but if this goes wrong, if she betrays us to Marcus, then we run again, Julian said simply, and we keep running until we find a way to fight back, because I meant what I said last night. I'm not losing you, not to Marcus, not to Apex, not to anyone. He kissed her again, hard and possessive, then dialed. Sienna Montgomery answered on the 3rd ring, her voice cool and professional. This is Sienna. It's Julian Blackwood, and before you say anything, yes, I'm alive. Oi. The silence on the other end stretched for several seconds. Then, Julian? My God, everyone thinks you're dead. Where have you been? Recovering from the attempt on my life, which I'm fairly certain was orchestrated by Marcus. He put the phone on speaker so Elena could hear. I need to know. Can I trust you? Because if you're working with him, if you're part of this merger, tell me now and I'll disappear again. Another pause. Marcus approached me 6 months ago about taking over Blackwood Industries after you were, how did he put it? Ready to step back? I told him he was delusional, that you'd never voluntarily give up control. 2 weeks later, your helicopter goes down and suddenly he's CEO. So no, Julian, I'm not working with him. And yes, you can trust me. Where are you? Julian's shoulders relaxed slightly. Somewhere safe. For now, I need information. What do you know about the Apex merger? Just what's public. 50-50 split. Marcus as CEO. Some new initiative about rural health programs. Why? Because Apex Pharma has been running illegal drug trials, killing people who get in their way, and Marcus has been helping them do it. Sienna's sharp intake of breath was audible. You have proof? Working on it, but I need your help. Can you get into Blackwood headquarters? Access my private server. Your biometrics won't work if they've locked you out of the system. I have backdoors Marcus doesn't know about. I'll walk you through it. But Sienna, this is dangerous if they catch you. Sienna's voice was dry. I've been navigating dangerous men my whole life. Tell me what you need. They spent the next 20 minutes going over the plan. Sienna would go to Blackwood Industries under the pretense of collecting some personal items. Julian had left her things that would be believable enough to get her into the building. Once there, she'd access his private server using credentials only he knew. Download everything, financial records, emails, anything that proved Marcus's embezzlement and involvement with Apex. There's one more thing, Julian said, glancing at Elena. Dr. Elena Thorne. She witnessed an Apex murder 3 years ago, has been in hiding ever since. They know about her now, and they're trying to eliminate both of us. Dr. Elena Thorne, Sienna said slowly. I remember that case. They tried to make it sound like she was unstable, possibly involved in the death herself. Classic discrediting. She's a witness, Julian said firmly, and she's under my protection. Whatever happens, she stays safe. That's non-negotiable. There was something in his tone, a possessiveness that made Sienna's voice turn knowing when she spoke again. I see. Well, then I'll make sure we have evidence to clear her name too. Give me 6 hours. I'll call you when I have something. She hung up, and Julian set down the phone, exhaling slowly. Under your protection? Elena asked, one eyebrow raised. Damn right you are. He pulled her into his lap, his arms banding around her waist. That woman, ex-fiancé or not, needs to understand that you're mine, that nothing and no one touches you without going through me first. Elena should have bristled at the caveman routine. Instead, she felt heat pull low in her belly, her body responding to the raw possession in his voice. Yours completely? Absolutely, in every way that matters. His hand slid up her spine into her hair, tilting her head back so he could look into her eyes. Last night wasn't just sex, Elena. That was me claiming you, marking you, making sure every part of you knows who you belong to. I don't belong to anyone, she said, but her breathless voice undermined the words. No? His other hand traced her hip, her waist, higher. Then why is your heart racing? Why are you trembling? Why do you look at me like you want me to strip you bare and take you right here on this dirty floor? Because she did. God help her. Despite the danger, despite everything, she wanted his hands on her skin, wanted to feel alive and connected and claimed. We don't have time for this. Sienna is gathering evidence. Marcus's people are looking for us. We have 6 hours before that call comes, Julian said, his mouth moving to her throat, finding her pulse point and sucking gently. And I need to remind you exactly why you're staying with me, why you're not running, why giving yourself to me was the smartest decision you've ever made. His arrogance should have annoyed her. Instead, it made her laugh, breathless and wanting. You think very highly of yourself, Mr. Blackwood. I think very highly of us. He stood, lifting her with him, and Elena wrapped her legs around his waist instinctively. And I think we both need this, need to remember what we're fighting for. He was right. In the chaos of running and fear, she'd forgotten the feel of his skin, the taste of his mouth, the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. He laid her down on the cleanest section of floor, his body covering hers, and kissed her until thinking became impossible. Tell me you want this, he said against her lips. Tell me you want me. I want you, Elena gasped as his hand slipped under her shirt, finding bare skin. God, Julian, I want you so much it scares me. Don't be scared, not of this, not of us. He stripped away her clothes with urgent efficiency, his own following, until there was nothing between them but need. I've got you. I'll always have you. They came together, desperate and fierce, the fear of the morning transmuting into passion, into connection, into the bone-deep certainty that whatever came next, they'd face it together. Julian whispered promises against her skin, told her she was beautiful, perfect, his, always his. And Elena let herself believe it, let herself fall completely, knowing that loving this man might destroy her, but not loving him would be worse. After, tangled together on the floor, sweaty and satisfied, Julian traced lazy patterns on her back and spoke quietly. When this is over, really over, I'm taking you somewhere no one knows us. Maybe the Greek islands or Thailand, somewhere we can just exist without looking over our shoulders. That sounds like a fantasy, Elena said, but she let herself imagine it anyway. It's a promise. You and me, Elena. That's the future I'm fighting for. She lifted her head to look at him. This complicated, intense man who'd crashed into her life and turned everything upside down. I love you. I know it's fast. I know it's crazy, but I love you. His eyes softened, and he pulled her up for a kiss that tasted like promises. I love you too, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone. You saved my life. Now let me save yours. We save each other, Elena corrected. That's how this works. Deal. They stayed like that, holding each other in the ruins of the fishing shack until Julian's phone rang 4 hours later. He answered immediately. Sienna? I'm in. Jesus, Julian, what Marcus has done. It's worse than we thought. Her voice was tight with controlled anger. I have everything. Financial records showing $300 million in embezzlement over 2 years. Emails between Marcus and Dr. Lydia Vance at Apex, planning your assassination. Proof of illegal trials in rural Florida communities. Human experimentation. At least 30 deaths covered up as natural causes. Elena's hand flew to her mouth. 30 deaths. 30 people like Silas Vane killed for profit. Can you get it to the FBI? Julian asked. The SEC, the media, everywhere at once. Already done. I've sent copies to every regulatory agency and major news outlet I can think of. But Julian, there's a problem. The files triggered some kind of trace. Marcus knows someone accessed your private server. He's on his way to the building right now, and he's bringing security. Get out of there right now, Sienna. Don't wait. Don't try to be a hero, just run. Way ahead of you. I'm already in my car. A pause. But you need to know. He's also dispatched teams to sweep the Everglades. He knows you're out there somewhere, and he's pulling out all the stops to find you. Julian swore viciously. How long do we have? An hour? Maybe 2. The evidence is out there now, but it'll take time for authorities to move on someone like Marcus. Until then, he's desperate and dangerous. Understood. Thank you, Sienna. I owe you. You really don't. That man tried to destroy everything you built and kill you in the process. I'm just returning the favor. Her voice softened slightly. Take care of yourself, Julian, and take care of your doctor. She must be something special to inspire this much loyalty. She's everything, Julian said simply, his eyes on Elena. Everything I didn't know I needed. He hung up and immediately started gathering their minimal supplies. We need to move. If they're sweeping the area, they'll find this place eventually. Where do we go? Elena asked, already pulling on her clothes. Somewhere they won't expect. Somewhere public enough that they can't make a move without witnesses. He thought for a moment. Miami. Blackwood headquarters. We go straight to the source. That's insane. That's literally walking into the lion's den. Exactly. Which is why they won't expect it. Plus, by the time we get there, the evidence will be spreading. Marcus will be dealing with federal agents, media, his whole world collapsing. He won't be able to touch us without confirming every accusation. It was crazy. It was also, Elena had to admit, probably their best shot. Okay, but we do this smart. We don't go in alone. Julian nodded, already texting on his phone. I'm calling Jax, the man who just tried to capture us, the man who let us escape when he could have shot us, who looked uncomfortable when Marcus's orders came through. Jax is a soldier, Elena. He follows orders, but he has a code. And I'm betting that code doesn't include murdering his boss and covering up human experimentation. He dialed, waited. Jax answered on the second ring. Mr. Blackwood. Jax, I'm about to make you an offer. You can keep following Marcus's orders, help him cover up his crimes, and go down with him when the FBI comes knocking. Or you can do the right thing. Help me expose him and walk away clean. Silence on the line. Then, what crimes are we talking about? Embezzlement, murder, illegal human experimentation causing at least 30 deaths. It's all documented. All being sent to federal agencies as we speak. Marcus is done, Jax. The only question is whether you go down, too. More silence. Elena could almost hear the man's mind working, weighing loyalty against ethics, orders against conscience. What do you need from me? Jax asked finally. Safe passage into Blackwood headquarters. You and your team stand down. Let me and Dr. Thorne through. Once we're there, we'll wait for the authorities with you as witnesses. No one gets hurt. Everyone walks away. And if Marcus orders me to stop you, then you tell him you're done taking orders from a man who tried to murder his best friend. Julian's voice hardened. I know you, Jax. I know your record. Marines, 2 tours in Afghanistan. Honorable discharge. You're not a killer for hire. You're a soldier. So act like one. Jax exhaled slowly. Where are you? On our way to Miami. We'll be at the headquarters in 90 minutes. Will you help us? I'll be there, and Mr. Blackwood. For what it's worth, I'm glad you're alive. So am I. See you soon. They made it to the boat, navigated back through the mangroves to where Elena had hidden her ancient truck weeks ago. The drive to Miami was tense, both of them watching every car, every shadow, waiting for Marcus's people to appear. But the road stayed clear, and as the Miami skyline rose before them, glass and steel gleaming in the afternoon sun, Elena felt a strange sense of inevitability settle over her. This was it, the end game. Either they walked out of this free, or they didn't walk out at all. Julian seemed to sense her thoughts. He reached over, laced his fingers through hers. Whatever happens, know that meeting you, falling for you, it's the best thing I've ever done. Memory or no memory. Don't, Elena said, her throat tight. Don't talk like you're saying goodbye. I'm not. I'm saying I love you, and I'm saying thank you for giving me a reason to fight instead of just survive. She squeezed his hand, unable to speak past the emotion clogging her throat. Blackwood headquarters was a 40-story tower of glass and ambition in the heart of downtown Miami. Julian parked in the executive garage using a code that still worked, to his obvious surprise, and they took the private elevator to the 40th floor. Jax was waiting in the lobby along with 3 of his security team, all armed but with weapons holstered. Mr. Blackwood, Jax said with a nod. Dr. Thorne. Thank you for this, Julian said, shaking the man's hand. Don't thank me yet. Mr. Sterling is in the building. So is Dr. Lydia Vance from Apex. They're in your old office, and from what I can tell, they're aware the situation is deteriorating. Federal agents are on their way, building surrounded, but they're waiting for someone in authority to actually arrest. You being alive complicates things legally. Then let's go uncomplicate them. Julian started toward the office, Elena beside him, Jax and his team flanking them. The 40th floor was all sleek minimalism, the kind of corporate luxury that spoke of serious money. Julian moved through it like he owned it, which technically he still did, his bearing shifting with each step. By the time they reached the corner office, he was every inch the billionaire CEO, commanding and cold. He didn't knock, just opened the door and walked in like he'd never left. Marcus Sterling stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, a phone to his ear, expensive suit perfectly tailored. Next to him, a woman in her 50s with severe features and intelligent eyes. Dr. Lydia Vance. They both turned at the intrusion, and the shock on Marcus's face would have been comical if the situation wasn't so deadly. Julian, Marcus said, the phone falling from his hand. You're alive. Disappointed? Julian asked pleasantly. I would be too, if I'd spent 2 weeks thinking I'd successfully murdered my best friend. Lydia's eyes narrowed, immediately assessing. Mr. Blackwood, we heard reports you'd survived but assumed they were mistaken. This is unexpected. I'm sure it is. Just like it's going to be unexpected when the FBI arrests you both for embezzlement, conspiracy to commit murder, and illegal human experimentation. Julian moved further into the room, and Elena stayed close, acutely aware of Jax's presence behind them. "Oh, wait. Did you think I didn't know? Did you think crashing my helicopter would make all your crimes disappear?" Marcus had recovered some composure, though his face was still pale. "Julian, you're clearly traumatized. The crash, the head injury, you're not thinking clearly. Let me get you medical help. We can sort this all out." "Don't try that with me." Julian's voice cracked like a whip. "Don't insult me by pretending concern. I remember everything, Marcus. The embezzlement you thought you'd hidden so well. Your deal with Apex to sell them my research division for illegal trials. You trying to kill me when I found out? All of it." "You can't prove any of that," Marcus said, but his eyes had gone calculating. "Dangerous." "Actually, he can," Sienna Montgomery said, walking through the door behind them, immaculate in a designer suit and holding a tablet. "Hello, Marcus. Enjoying your last few minutes of freedom?" Marcus's expression turned ugly. "Sienna, I should have known you'd stick your nose in." "You really should have," she agreed cheerfully. "Considering I just handed the FBI, the SEC, and every major news outlet in the country documented proof of every crime you've committed. Financial records, emails, trial data, all of it. You're done." Lydia moved then, her hand going to her purse, but Jax was faster. "Don't. Hands where I can see them, Doctor." Two of Jax's team moved to flank Lydia and Marcus, professional and efficient. Outside the windows, Elena could see more vehicles arriving, official ones with lights flashing. "It's over," Julian said quietly. "You lost, Marcus. The second you decided to put profit over lives, you lost." Marcus stared at his former friend, and for a moment, something almost like regret flickered across his face. "I built this too, you know. It wasn't just you. I worked just as hard, sacrificed just as much. But it was always the Julian Blackwood show. Your name on the building, your face in the magazines. I was just the COO, just the second. Do you have any idea what that feels like? So you decided to kill me and steal everything I'd built." Julian shook his head. "That's not ambition, Marcus. That's pathetic." "You don't understand," Marcus said. And now his voice was rising, control slipping. "You never let anyone close, never trusted anyone, always had to be in control. Working with you was like serving a king. I just wanted what was mine. What was yours?" Julian's laugh was bitter. "You embezzled hundreds of millions. You sold out to a company running illegal experiments on poor people. You killed me, or tried to. And for what? Money you already had? Power you could have earned legitimately?" "I earned it," Marcus snarled. "I earned all of it." "Then you should have taken it honestly." Julian stepped closer, and Elena saw the rage he'd been holding back finally surface. "You were my best friend, the one person I trusted completely, and you tried to kill me. Do you have any idea? Can you even comprehend what that betrayal feels like?" "About as well as you comprehend what it felt like to be in your shadow for 15 years, Marcus shot back. The door burst open, federal agents flooding in, weapons drawn, shouting commands. Marcus and Lydia were pushed to the ground, handcuffed, read their rights. Through it all, Julian just stood there, watching his former friend and business partner brought down, his expression unreadable. Elena moved to his side, took his hand. He gripped hers like a lifeline. "Mr. Blackwood." One of the agents approached, badge out. "Special Agent Rivera, FBI. We need to take your statement." "Of course, but first I need you to know that Dr. Elena Thorne is a witness, not a suspect. She witnessed an Apex Pharma murder 3 years ago and has been in hiding under threat. I want full immunity and protection for her before we proceed." Agent Rivera glanced at Elena, recognition dawning. "The Silas Vane case. We've been wanting to talk to you for a long time, Doctor." "And I've been wanting to talk to you," Elena said, finding her voice. I have evidence, medical records, financial transactions, proof that Apex has been killing people who threaten their illegal operations. I'll give you everything, but I need guarantees. We can arrange that, Mr. Blackwood, if you'll both come with us. They were escorted out, past Marcus and Lydia being loaded into separate vehicles, past crowds of Blackwood Industries employees watching in shock. The media had already arrived, cameras and reporters swarming, shouting questions. Julian ignored them all, his arm around Elena, sheltering her from the chaos. At the federal building, they spent hours giving statements, going through evidence, confirming details. Sienna joined them, as did Jax, all of them pieces in the puzzle that would take down not just Marcus Sterling, but the entire corrupt network he'd built with Apex. By the time they were finished, the sun had set, and Elena was exhausted in a way that went bone deep. Agent Rivera assured them protective custody was available if they wanted it, but Julian declined. I have my own security now, he said, glancing at Jax, who nodded. And I think we've earned one night of peace. They ended up back at Julian's penthouse, the same one from the night this all started. Jax and a small team swept it first, declared it secure, then left them alone. Elena stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the Miami lights, and felt like she'd stepped into another world. This is where you lived, she said softly. This is where I existed, Julian corrected, coming up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. That boathouse with you, that was living. She leaned back against him, letting his warmth seep into her. What happens now? Now Marcus and Lydia go to prison for a very long time. Apex Pharma gets dismantled and investigated. Blackwood Industries gets restructured with actual oversight and ethics. He turned her to face him. And you get your life back, your medical license, your reputation, everything. I don't want my old life back, Elena said, surprising herself with the certainty. I don't know what I want. Everything's changed. Then we'll figure it out together. He cupped her face, his thumbs stroking her cheekbones. I meant what I said about taking you somewhere. Greece, Thailand, anywhere you want. We can disappear for a while. Let the dust settle. Just be together without all this weight. You'd really walk away from all this? She gestured at the penthouse, the city beyond. Your empire? In a heartbeat. Because you taught me something, Elena. You taught me that success without connection is just expensive loneliness, and I'm done being lonely. He kissed her softly. So, yes. I'll restructure the company, put people I trust in charge, and then I'm taking the woman I love on the vacation of a lifetime, assuming she'll have me. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. The good kind this time. Are you asking me to run away with you, Mr. Blackwood? I'm asking you to build a life with me. Not running, not hiding, just living. Really living the way we did in that boathouse. His expression turned vulnerable. I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few weeks. But Elena, when I think about my future, you're in every part of it. So I'm asking, will you give us a real chance? No conspiracies, no danger. Just you and me figuring out what we can be. She kissed him instead of answering with words, pouring everything she felt into it. 3 years of loneliness and fear dissolving in the certainty of his arms around her. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, she smiled. Yes, to all of it. Greece, Thailand, building a life, everything, yes. Julian's answering smile was blinding. He lifted her into his arms, carrying her toward the bedroom. Good, because I have plans for you, Dr. Thorne. Starting with making sure you understand exactly how thoroughly you've ruined me for anyone else. Ruined you? Elena laughed, her arms around his neck completely, irrevocably. I'm yours, Elena. Every broken, rebuilt piece of me belongs to you. He laid her on the bed, his body covering hers. "Now, let me spend the rest of the night proving it." And he did, with his hands and mouth and whispered words that sounded like prayers. They made love slow and sweet, then fast and desperate, then slow again, learning each other without the shadow of danger hanging over them. Julian told her she was beautiful, perfect, his, always and forever. Elena told him she loved him, trusted him, chose him every single day. Afterward, wrapped together in sheets that probably cost more than her truck, Elena felt peace settle over her for the first time in 3 years. "I love you," Julian murmured into her hair. "My angel from the river, my salvation." "I love you too," Elena whispered back. "My beautiful mystery, my home." Outside, the city glittered on, indifferent to their story. But inside, 2 broken people had found each other and made something whole. And that, Elena thought, as sleep finally claimed her, was more valuable than any empire. 6 months later, Elena stood in the doorway of her new clinic, watching the sun set over the Maka River. The building was state-of-the-art, fully equipped, and completely free to anyone who needed care. The sign above the door read, "Thorn Community Medical Center," funded by the Blackwood Foundation and staffed by doctors who believed medicine was a right, not a privilege. Behind her, Julian wrapped his arms around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "Happy?" "Deliriously," she said, leaning into him. "Thank you for this, for making it possible." "You're the one making it possible. I just wrote the check." He kissed her neck. "How was the first week?" "Exhausting. Rewarding. Perfect." She turned in his arms. "How was your week?" "Spent most of it in conference calls, restructuring pharmaceutical trial protocols. Boring but necessary." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "Though I did get a very interesting call from a journalist wanting to write a book about our story. Billionaire saved by doctor, falls in love, takes down corrupt empire. Apparently it's very romantic." Elena laughed. "What did you tell them?" "That our story isn't for sale. It's just for us." He pulled her closer. "Besides, how could anyone capture what we have? The fear, the hope, the way you looked at me when I couldn't even remember my own name." "The way you looked at me like I was the only thing in the world that mattered," Elena added softly. "You were. You are." He kissed her slow and thorough. "Ready to go home?" Home was the boathouse, which Julian had renovated into something beautiful while keeping its essential character. Solar panels, running water, and actual insulation, but still the same peaceful isolation that had sheltered them when they needed it most. They split their time between there and the Miami penthouse, between quiet and chaos, between simplicity and luxury. But wherever they were together, and that made it home. As they walked to the car, Elena's hand in Julian's, she thought about how far they'd both come. Marcus and Lydia were awaiting trial, facing decades in prison. Apex Pharma had been dismantled, its victims compensated, its crimes exposed. Blackwood Industries had become a model for ethical pharmaceutical research with Julian as chairman and a new CEO he actually trusted. And Elena, she had her life back. Her medical license reinstated, her name cleared, her purpose renewed. But more than that, she had love. Real, deep, complicated, beautiful love with a man who saw her, all of her, and chose her anyway. "What are you thinking?" Julian asked as they drove along the coast, windows down, warm air rushing in. "That I'm glad you crashed into my life," Elena said. He laughed, the sound full and genuine. "Literally crashed. Best crash ever." "Agreed." He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles. "Though let's not make a habit of it." "Deal." Ozer, they drove into the sunset. 2 souls who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something extraordinary from the ruins. Their story wasn't perfect. It was messy and complicated and started with violence and fear. But it was theirs, hard-won and true. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Elena Thorne had spent 3 years hiding from life, and Julian Blackwood had spent 35 years locked away from feeling. But together they'd learned to live, to love, to be vulnerable and strong in equal measure. The river had brought them together, love had made them whole, and the future, stretching bright and uncertain before them, was theirs to write together. Always together. 1 year, 3 months, and 17 days after Julian Blackwood died and came back to life, he woke up in the boathouse to the sound of rain on the tin roof and the warm weight of Elena's body sprawled across his chest. Her natural curls tickled his jaw, one of her legs tangled between his, and he lay perfectly still, not wanting to disturb this exact moment. Outside, the Maka River sang its eternal song, and somewhere in the cypress trees, an osprey called to its mate. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, probably the 6th message from his new CEO about the quarterly earnings call. Julian ignored it. Those days of checking his phone before his eyes were fully open, of prioritizing empire over existence, felt like they belonged to a stranger, which he supposed they did. Elena stirred against him, her lips brushing his collarbone in a sleepy kiss that sent heat straight through him, despite a year of mornings exactly like this. "You're thinking too loud," she murmured, her voice rough with sleep. "Just thinking about how I almost missed this," he said, his hand tracing lazy circles on her bare back. "If that helicopter hadn't crashed, if you hadn't been fishing that morning, I'd still be that miserable bastard in the photographs." "Fishing," Elena corrected, lifting her head to look at him with those intelligent dark eyes that still made his breath catch. "I was fishing, past tense, because someone convinced me that running a free clinic and splitting time between here and Miami meant I didn't have enough hours to sit in a boat at dawn." "I never said you couldn't fish. I said I wanted you in bed at dawn instead." His hand slid lower, making her gasp. "Much better use of morning hours." She laughed, that full-throated sound he'd become addicted to, and pushed up to straddle him, the sheet falling away. "You're insatiable. Only for you." He gripped her hips, looking up at her like she was every sunrise he'd ever missed. "Every single day for the rest of my life, only for you." Her expression softened, and she leaned down to kiss him slow and deep. When she pulled back, there were tears in her eyes, the happy kind. "I have something to tell you." Julian's heart stopped, then started again at double speed because he recognized that particular tone, hope, fear, and joy all mixed together. "Elena? Julian, I'm pregnant." The words came out in a rush. 8 weeks. I found out yesterday at the clinic, but I wanted to wait until we were here, in this place where everything started, to tell you. The world tilted sideways. Julian sat up carefully, bringing her with him, his hands framing her face. We're going to have a baby." "We're going to have a baby," she confirmed. And now she was crying for real, smiling through the tears. "I know we didn't plan it. I know it's fast. But Julian, I want this. I want everything with you." He kissed her then, tasting salt and joy and the future all at once. When he could speak, his voice came out wrecked. "I spent 35 years convinced I didn't know how to love anyone, that I was too broken, too cold, too damaged. Then you pulled me out of a swamp and taught me that being broken just means there's room to rebuild into something better. You taught me that hiding isn't living," Elena said, her forehead pressed to his. "That sometimes the scariest thing, opening your heart, is the only thing worth doing." "Our kid is going to be so confused when we tell them how we met," Julian said, and felt her laugh against his chest. "Mommy saved Daddy from a helicopter crash and they fell in love while running from murderers." Totally normal origin story. Totally normal, he agreed, his hand moving to her still flat stomach with something like reverence. God, Elena, I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me sometimes. Outside, the rain slowed to a whisper, and sunlight began breaking through the clouds in golden shafts. Julian pulled Elena back down to the bed, holding her close, feeling her heartbeat against his ribs. Somewhere in Miami, his company was making ethical pharmaceuticals that saved lives instead of destroying them. Somewhere in rural Florida, Elena's clinic was giving hope to people who'd been forgotten by the system. And here, in this renovated boathouse, where a broken man had learned to feel again, new life was beginning. Thank you, Julian whispered into her hair. For what? For fishing that morning, for being brave enough to save a stranger, for giving me a reason to be better than I was. Elena tilted her head back, her eyes shining. Thank you for falling into my life. Literally. They laughed together. Two people who'd found each other in the wreckage and built something beautiful from the ruins. Outside, the river flowed eternal, witness to their beginning and promise of all their tomorrows. The end. The moral lesson. This story teaches us a profound truth about the human condition. Our true identity is not defined by our titles, our wealth, or the walls we build to protect ourselves, but by the choices we make when we have everything to lose. Julian lived in a world of immense power, yet he was a miserable bastard because he had no genuine connection. Elena lived in total isolation to survive, yet she was drowning because she had no purpose. It was only when they were stripped of their labels, he through amnesia and she through the risk of being found, that they discovered their true strength. The moral is that vulnerability is not a weakness. It is the ultimate form of courage. It takes courage to stop hiding from the past, and it takes even greater courage to trust another person with your future. True success is not measured by the height of the empire you build, but by the depth of the integrity you maintain and the love you are willing to fight for. In the end, the most valuable thing we can possess is not a billion-dollar company, but a soul that is brave enough to fish at dawn, to step out into the unknown and save another, even when the rules say to stay invisible.